Hi, guys. Welcome back to Sports with Mono and Mono. It's August 12th, 2023, right? The dog days of August. Not as hot as it used to be. Hopefully, it's cooling off. But first and foremost, like what a travesty is going on in Hawaii. And it just feels terrible to have to watch this on television and see what's going on from one of the most beautiful states in our union. And our thoughts and prayers are out to all of those people affected by it. It's just been a terrible scene. So, but listen, through tragedy, we find our outlet through sports and things like that. So we will jump right in. And of course, I just wanted to give a shout out and thank you to everybody that's given Steve his undying support. And he's getting better and better every day, I believe. And he's listening to the show this morning. We love you, Steve, and get well. And thank you to everybody that's been sending their thoughts and prayers. I appreciate it. So we're going to jump into our monologue, of course, which is sponsored by Coriano Trucking of Summerhill, New York. And here's the monologue. I'm going to talk about the Yankees and the Mets, right? And New York fans are very, very fickle, right? So when we look at each team, and we'll start with the Yankees, right? They're still not completely out of it, but they're just absolutely decimated with injuries and players that aren't performing, right? So the question always comes down, somebody's going to have to take the fall. Even if they make the playoffs, obviously, they don't have the pitching and stuff to go, win the World Series. So it's going to be a disappointing year for Yankee fans. So the question comes up, is it Cashman's fault? Is it Boone's fault? And, I've been looking very closely at this. And on this case, and I've always kind of defended Brian Cashman a lot over the years. And he's a very loyal guy with the Steinbrenners and so forth, just got a new contract. But I always look at it as the general manager is the guy that's got to go out and get players and perform on the field. And Cashman's went out in the past couple of years and got players that just haven't performed. And that's why we're having this. We have obviously one of the best players in Judge and things like that, but that's not enough. And he's come back from his little toe injury, but it's not going to be enough for them to win the World Series. So who's going to take the fall? I don't know. I was critical of Boone this year, watching some of his moves with the pitching and so forth, but then I started to realize, but he's only working with what he has. And he kept pulling Domingo Germán after 5 innings, and now we know that there was a backstory to that. So I'm not going to hang Aaron Boone on this. So if somebody's got to go, I think this time it's got to be the general manager, because he put these players and signed the Rodans and the Montazes and all these other guys that let's just call them a bust, right? And they're scrapping and fighting. They're hanging over 500, but overall, there's just not enough players on that team to go places. So they got to look and see what the Mets are doing. And we saw what happened with the Mets this year. And I talked about the Mets in the beginning of the year. I didn't see them as having a World Series caliber team, very similar to like now the Jets are going to be a Super Bowl contenders. And last year, the Mets were automatically a World Series contender, and it hasn't worked out that way. And, is that Buck Showalter's fault? No. Again, he can only manage with the players that he has. And the philosophy with the Mets was to sign Verlander and Scherzer, and that was going to be enough to get them over the top. And obviously it hasn't worked out that way. So the Mets are doing a almost a 180, saying, okay, we know we don't have the players. 6 months ago, they thought they had a World Series team, and they don't. Right? Nimmo, great player, keep him. McNeil's, he's not going to win another batting title again. That was his career year. And Lindor's having a good year, and here's the situation with the Mets. You got to Pete Alonso, right? You're going to have to pay him. So are the Mets going to, if they're in this rebuilding mode, and they made some trades, they got a lot of good capital in the minor leagues, but you know what that means? That means they're not going to contend next year, right? Just like Alvarez behind the plate, they kept him, and he's got his rookie year out of the way, and he's going to be a great player. So the Mets have decided, and it was a great thing. Steve Cohen sent them a letter to all season ticket holders saying that we apologize for this terrible season we're having, and we're trying to restructure it. So I think Billy Epler gets a pass on this, kind of too new. But I certainly wouldn't hang anything on Buck Showalter. So, the Mets are going the rebuilding route, and the Yankees do what they do, and they're going to go out and sign free agents, and some of them are going to pan out. Some of the young kids aren't working out. They got to address the catcher situation. So there's a lot going on for New York baseball, and I just wanted to bring that up because there's two different philosophies here. The Yankees have never really said, we're going to do a complete rebuild, and that's not happening. So, but the Mets, maybe that's the way they're going, but it's going to be a tough couple of years to get these young kids. Look at Beatty. He was the next star prospect, and they had to send him back to the minors. So there's so many things that can happen, and we'd love to hear your comments, not just from Yankees or Mets fans, from all loyal listeners of Sports with Mono and Mono. Send us an email at sportswithmonoandmono@gmail.com. Give us your thoughts. So Eli, what are your thoughts here? Come on.
I really just, what I could say is the Mets are always going to be in a rebuilding year. It's been like that for a while. It's going to take some time. I appreciate the Mets' honesty for apologizing to their fans. That I do appreciate, and I thought that's very kind of them. And obviously, it's just going to be a rebuilding year. They're going to have their chance eventually. May not be next year, but it'll happen eventually. The Yankees, on the other hand, it's the same old story every year. They're going to try to go hard. Someone's going to get hurt, like Judge, and they're going to be off. They're going to be losing. What's going to happen next? What's going to happen? They'll make the playoffs, lose the first round, and same old story all over again for the Yankees. Honest with you, I don't know who to blame at this point because it's just a continuous pattern, but it's just a really interesting takes on everything that happened.
Yeah, and you just look at the Carlos Rodon. He had a Cy Young year 1 year, but that's it. And you look at it and you say, is he worth $60 million, right? The only two bright spots the Yankees have right now are Derek Cole and Aaron Judge. And
absolutely,
Gleyber Torres is having a good year. He's not gonna win any Gold Gloves at second, but we'll see down the stretch. We're less than 50 games to go in the season, and let's look at some of the other teams, like the cream of the crop, right? You have to put the Braves and the Dodgers right there. They just keep on winning. They got solid lineups up and down, and they're obviously the two favorites to win the World Series. So that's awesome to see. And I told you, one of my favorite players is Freddie Freeman, and he just keeps tearing it up. And Acuna Jr., hopefully he's not hurt getting hit by that pitch the other night, but they have a lineup, and hey, maybe they just haven't been beset with injuries like some of these other teams, but even if they do, they seem to fill that void, and the Yankees don't have players on the side to fill that void enough to carry them. So things are going on in Major League Baseball with down the stretch, and I wanted to bring up this quick thing, that little Ramirez and Tim Anderson scrap at second base. I've always had some kind of a grudge against this Tim Anderson because he thinks he was the next Lou Gehrig in this league.
Yeah.
And he talks and talks and talks. Hasn't produced this year. Is having an awful year. He's had a couple of good years, but he caused that fight, and he's the guy that got knocked to the ground, and that was quite a shot by Ramirez. So they obviously suspended them. I think
don't blame them.
I think Anderson should have got more games and Ramirez less, because I think it was completely Anderson's fault. But that's a baseball scrap. You see that kind of stuff all the time. And
All the time, no matter which sport it is, always it's gonna be that one person, not the other. Just
yeah,
just got to get through it, I guess you could say.
you do. So, like I said, we're Eli with below 50 games to go down the stretch, and
Yeah.
baseball is great
It's coming
to
to a
watch.
close.
And you bet, you bet. Hey, so let's move on. And I got a little criticism last week from one of our, I'm going to call him our soccer correspondent, Mr. Diego Cruz, who's very, very knowledgeable. And he said we didn't go enough into depth, but today was a great weekend for the Women's World Cup, right? Obviously, we have to mention that the U.S. team didn't live up to the expectations, of course, right? But we're down in the Final Four with Spain and Sweden in one game, and Sweden coming off that victory over the USA. So that's going to be a good match. And there was a couple of other good matches today. Australia beat France in a record number of penalty kicks. That was very, very exciting if you were up at 3 a.m. to watch it.
Yeah.
But I happened to be up, so I watched it, and it was exciting as hell. They're looking to be the first home country to win the Women's World Cup since like 90-something. Yeah, from the U.S.
Wow, that's very good.
Right? And England, it was a great match with Colombia, and that's why Diego is our resident Colombian soccer expert. So I know he's disappointed, but that was actually a great match. And England prevailed. And, England, this is their third straight semifinals. It was a great match. So it's actually been exciting. And the Final Four is going to draw it's going to draw a lot of attention, and people are, the bars will be open. The bars will be open in Hoboken at 5 a.m. Right? We know that.
Oh, God.
So that was actually exciting, but I know the U.S. fans are disappointed and so forth. And
I am because if you look at the goal, I pulled it up here. I had to take a screenshot of it. That was the goal line, that white line. That's the ball. And I'm gonna just take off the FIFA World Cup one thing. That's literally I couldn't believe that counted. I was so I couldn't understand. It was unbelievable. I thought it was no goal.
No, but if you look at the video replay, though, it's literally
I know it crossed the goal
2 millimeters over the line, and that's why they have it, right?
Yeah, but the original shot they showed in the beginning, it's like, oh my God, they didn't make it. They still alive. But then the replay showed they did cross the goal line. So it was very, very crazy. And all I could say is just wow. And I still that's got to be horrible to look at that photo.
Right, but you do have to give credit that this video replay actually answered the question of whether it was a goal. Whether you agree with replay and all these other sports, I
agree. That was a really good replay. Obviously, it's the correct call, but from the original angle Fox showed us before they replayed it, it would look like a no goal, but it was very good.
No question. It looked like a save at the beginning, first and foremost. But that's you would hate to see a World Cup turn without a review, and it turns out that it actually was a goal. So I think that worked out good for soccer. I
wish they did that for high school sports, not just soccer, but in general, just because the amount of replay calls that they really need a replay is just a lot. But that's a whole.
I know, but in high school and stuff, it's the cost of it and the time wise, it's just not practical, right?
Yeah, but still.
So good stuff. So that's what Tuesday and Wednesday is the
Tuesday, Wednesday, 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. on Fox.
Yeah.
And then next weekend is the third place match and the final, but the final apparently is at 6 o'clock in the morning. So very early.
Yeah, I don't get the third place match thing, but anyway, that's just me. I don't know. Seems like irrelevant, but it's going to pack the stadium. It's going to draw attention, and people will watch it anyway.
Absolutely.
Right. So let's move on to the NFL. Right. Preseason started this weekend and pretty much started this weekend. And I know your Seattle Seahawks came off with a win in their first preseason game.
Yes,
But
they
let's
did, and
not
I'm super excited about that. And good
right. But
job.
keep the corks in the
Cool
champagne
down.
bottle for now. It doesn't mean much,
Because
right?
it doesn't mean much, I know. Because if you look at half of these scores so far, it's like, yeah, okay, just because they won, they ain't winning no Super Bowl, they ain't going no playoffs. And I know I gotta just be grateful for the win you got, but keep in mind it's only preseason, and this really doesn't really matter in the real future. So once week one starts, it's a whole different ball game.
Right. But you got to have a lot of intriguing things going on, right? And we know
Right.
the preseason is just, they got 80 guys in camp and only 53 of them are going to make it. And, so these are guys are fighting for their lives, fighting for their career to make it in the NFL. And that's what makes it exciting. But you also have, like in Tampa, you got Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask. Like, who's going to be the guy?
Right.
For Tampa Bay's sake, I'm hoping it's Kyle Trask because I saw him play a lot of games at Florida, and he's a player. And I think we've seen enough of Baker Mayfield to know that he's not the team that's going to lead you to the promised land, but that's still up in the air. You look at the Packers, right? They started their new era with Jordan Love.
Yes.
By the way, this kid deserves a chance. He's been quiet. He's been just sitting there, letting this Aaron Rodgers situation play out, waiting for his chance. I just hope he stays healthy. I think the difficult thing for the Packers is the supporting cast isn't as good as you would hope a rookie quarter. And we call him a rookie. It's probably his third year in the league, but
Yeah.
it's now his team. And that they went out on a limb and drafted him, moved up in the draft to take him. So good luck to him. I know a lot of Packer fans, Abe Vallejo and Eric Hansen, these guys, they live and die with their Packers. So I think, it's a good opportunity for this kid. I just hope he stays healthy, gets the opportunity, and shoves it right back in Aaron Rodgers' face.
Oh,
says,
absolutely.
That's what I'm hoping.
Oh, absolutely. Just to recap, the winners of this week were Texans, Seahawks, Lions, Steelers, Packers, Falcons, Commanders, and Cardinals. More games are on tap for today, including the New York Jets, which will be available on CBS New York. For those who are interested in watching week 2 of the Jets, most games are going to be available on NFL Network except for Colts, Bills, and Jaguars, Cowboys. So,
well, I'm guilty of this. I can barely watch preseason football. I mean, the Giants were on last night, and of course, you want to see, guys that are battling for jobs and so forth. But preseason is difficult for me to watch.
I know I don't really watch it too much, but sometimes you have to. So
yeah,
it is what it is.
So I was chuckling this week again, and this whole I gave the parallel before, like the Mets. All Met fans were thinking they were going to the World Series, and we talked about this before, right? The Jets, and I'm hearing Jet fans and people saying they're going to go 15-2 with Aaron Rodgers, and I say, wait a minute,
hold on, hold your horses right there, and that's exactly what I say. And I want to actually bring this up. I was going to bring this up in random points, but I'll bring it up now. So as we all know, Jets are supposed to be debuting on Hard Knocks. I had the opportunity to watch the first episode of Hard Knocks because I said, hey, why not? Let's see how well these Jets do. And I learned a lot. It was hilarious and funny and just good to watch. And here are my notes that I'll just share with you all real quick. Apparently, based off of what we've seen, Aaron Rodgers seems to be the school quarterback. He barely waves to the fans. Barely waved once to the fans. It was just like, wow, like really a rude guy, it seems like, based off of the camera was following him.
But he's so arrogant that he thinks he walks on water and he doesn't have to do that.
Yeah, and the head coach Saleh, he used a lot of great analogies, especially with the eagle and the crow scenario. Very good on his end. And Saleh says Aaron Rodgers is the best QB I've ever coached. So that I thought was funny.
Right. So who's he choosing between Mike White and Zach Wilson? Yeah. I mean, and Joe Flacco. I mean, Saleh's only been here for 3 years. Of course, he's the best quarterback he's ever coached.
The narrator was funny in the show. What I could say is Garrett Wilson's going to be featured in a Dunkin' commercial. They were showing him taking practice shots of a Dunkin' commercial. I thought that was funny. And the Jets players didn't want to be on Hard Knocks. Aaron Rodgers was all for it, apparently. and he kept pushing the players to just have fun and enjoy it. And I definitely learned a lot from that episode. And one last thing I think I'll conclude with here is we hear a lot about Nathaniel Hackett and the Rodgers. We hear all about that. One big play that Aaron Rodgers loves to do is these no-look passes. You see a lot of they showed a lot of clips of what Aaron Rodgers did with these no-look passes. They look horrible. There are some Jets players caught it and understood the play, but some of them froze completely. And I feel like that's going to be the biggest struggle for this New York Jets team coming up this season. Aaron Rodgers and those no-look passes. And everyone has to be careful of that because he tends to do that a lot. You're going to get a lot of downtimes and maybe possible interceptions, because he's known for these no-look passes. And it seems like that's going to be a huge fail to this New York Jets team. But obviously, we'll have to wait. But those are my Hard Knock notes. And one last thing to conclude, NFL Plus news. The NFL Plus has debuted for the second year again, and Red Zone will be added this year to the subscription service for $99.99 a year. So if you want a Red Zone, go NFL Plus. That actually is not a bad deal compared to what you hear. But those are my Hard Knock notes and my NFL Plus news.
All right. Well, listen, there's a couple other quick notes we'll bring up in the NFL, right? Like, Teddy Bridgewater signs with the Lions, right? So, again, everybody keeps throwing Teddy Bridgewater's name out there, but yet he goes from team to team to team. This is like his 6th or 7th team. I'm not saying he's not a serviceable guy. He's actually, he's a solid backup, but watch if Detroit starts to falter and Goff comes back to earth and, plays the way that, he played his last couple of years in Los Angeles, then look for Bridgewater to get a chance, and then Bridgewater will get hurt. And, we've seen this movie 1,000 times, right?
Right.
And we still have some running back situations, right? This Jonathan Taylor thing in Indianapolis it's kind of an ugly scene. I mean, he's still playing under his rookie deal. So I don't see him having a lot of leverage here. Like Jacobs and Barkley, it's a little bit different, but, they need to get that resolved in order for Indianapolis to make any kind of a run. So, that's something to keep an eye on. Right?
Absolutely.
All right. So the NFL's underway. So just a couple other quick things. Let's touch base on the NBA again, because I think this is the weekend, right, Eli, that they're the inductions into the Hall of Fame for guys and
Hall of Fame
so
inductions. What happened this week?
I was going through the list and I was looking, and Paul Gasol is going to the Hall of Fame, and Sports with Mono and Mono, who's always done a Hall of Fame thing, we're very stringent. When you say a name, it's either a yes or no for the Hall of Fame. And I'm going to go down this list again. Paul Gasol, no, I don't see him as one of those Hall of Fame caliber guys. Yeah, he won a couple of rings with the Lakers. He had a great surrounding cast, but Paul Gasol, I'd say no. Tony Parker, 100% yes. Great player, won several championships and was a key component of those championships. Right, not just a roster guy. And obviously Dirk Nowitzki, 100%. First ballot Hall of Famer, no question. The guy showed up every night. He played his heart out every night, was an incredible shooter, so absolutely. And here's one other one. I was kind of on the fence with this, and I'd like your thoughts. Dwayne Wade. And I'm not saying Dwayne Wade wasn't a great player, but he became when LeBron James came to that team, he pushed them over the edge. And I always like to see, a player like Dwayne Wade to win one before LeBron James got there. And I don't think they did, unless I'm mistaken.
No, I think you're right. Yeah.
Right. I mean, an absolutely great player. But I would always say, you know what, maybe he could have waited a year or two, definitely would get in. But, those are my things. And, of course, Greg Popovich, you know what? You have to put him in the Hall of Fame because the guy he's the all-time winningest coach, I think, now.
Yeah.
Many, many championships. And somebody say, yeah, that's like Phil Jackson. Phil Jackson was the head coach of the Chicago Bulls, but he also had Pippen he had a guy named Michael Jordan. So you have to.
Right.
But I think he's tough. And listen, they haven't had talent past couple of years, and they've played like that. So you
Right.
sometimes you wonder. But I don't have. I think Popovich is one of the great interviews post game after his particular game. Right? He's funny.
Right.
He's to the point. But so those are the Hall of Fame guys, and they're going in. And one other NBA note was, and I was trying to read into this a little bit, that Giannis is not going to be playing for Greece in the FIBA World Cup. And
Yeah.
I think that means, he's still recovering a little bit from whatever was ailing him last year. And as much as he wants to play for his home country, he is so focused on getting back to hoisting an NBA championship trophy. I think that's part of the reason he made that decision to say, you know what? I got to work this out. I want to be 100% healthy because, listen, I think he's one of the best, if not the best player in the game. But you know what? You need more than one championship to go down as one of the all-time greats. And I think his mind is set and focused on that. And you know what? I think he's not going to leave this one on the table. It's very, very early, but I think he's so determined to win this championship, and he's a team that could carry him on his shoulders to do that. So,
absolutely.
NBA, that's enough of that, right?
I think I'm going to just add one more. I'm going to add one more point for NBA, if that's okay. So the NBA schedule is supposed to be released within the upcoming days. They did announce the Christmas schedule. Those games are on ABC and ESPN. The dates and times are to be determined, but we all know it's on Christmas Day. The Bucks are at the Knicks, 76ers are at the Heat, Celtics at the Lakers, Mavericks at the Suns, and the Warriors are at the Nuggets. That's your Christmas Day schedule. The full schedule will be released sometime this week, so it's a big week in the NBA. So we'll have a lot to talk about next week once everything is fully released and done for.
Yeah. I know the NBA's Christmas Day schedule is a big thing,
Yeah.
But I'll probably watch more of the reruns of Christmas Story, which runs for 24 hours at Christmas.
I'll be watching football. There's going to be football, 2 or 3 football games this year. I forget about the basketball. Worry about the football.
You got it.
Yeah.
So let's move on to our random points of interest, Eli. We got a bunch here, and of course, that's sponsored by Lynch Toyota of Manchester, Connecticut, who I'm going to see the captor of the dealership boat sometime next month. And again, always thank them for their loyalty and support for Sports with Mono and Mono. Big sponsor for the show. So a couple of quick things on random points of interest, and you and I talked about this a little bit earlier before the show. This Kevin Brown situation in Baltimore, and you know what? I've listened to that sound bite time and time again, and I'm baffled by it. I mean, I'm absolutely mesmerized by what an injustice to this guy. All he was doing was reporting facts. And, the Baltimore Orioles and Peter Angelo said this was a bad move. No, this is exactly how it's played out for the past few years. And the Orioles were in a rebuilding mode, and they finally turned the corner, and they're a formidable team. But to get suspended for something like that, you could see all these other guys making, who was the last guy out in Oakland, made some inappropriate comments. This was nothing but reporting the facts, and nothing that we haven't seen Michael Kay or Gary Cohen or anybody else say. You're going into a series against a team that has owned you for the past 5 years. That's a fact. So I know you've got some thoughts on this.
Well, all I know is like you said, I've watched it so many times. I don't get it. He did nothing wrong. He said the truth. I've agreed with every single announcer in person that stood up for him, and I believe it. And Michael Kay just basically said he told the truth. And if this was apparently offensive to the management and Pete Angelos, it shouldn't be him that's fired. It should be the graphics department that's fired. Everybody, because not only did he just say the truth, he also said on a graphic. So I 100% think he should not have been fired. And if they were suspended, whatever the case may be, suspended, I believe it was. But if you're going to suspend somebody, you have to suspend everybody. And number one, I disagree with everything. I hate the situation. Orioles returned him yesterday to the broadcast versus the Mariners. He basically did not mention one thing that happened. All we know is it's a disgrace, and the 2 games they've lost, and that was the first 2 games since Kevin Brown was not broadcasting. They lost, and that just goes to show you like how much everybody has turned the tables on this team.
Well, I guess they've made up, so he's back on the air, obviously.
Yeah, he's back on the air. He said August 11th he was back on, and he was back on the air. Mentioned nothing of what happened. All I could say is it was absolutely just dumb, a disgrace, and he did nothing but tell the truth. And I'm just glad the situation's over. And yeah, that's my thoughts.
Absolutely.
My rant on the Total Shoot podcast.
You and I and everybody in the sports world agrees on this, except Peter Angelos, I guess. So
absolutely. Yeah. He said nothing but the truth.
Right. So a couple other random notes. You know, sometimes these sports athletes get away with stuff, but there was this Alvin Kamara situation in Las Vegas, and you know, this was a bad look. They got it all on video, so at least they did the right thing and suspended this guy for the first 3 games of the season. But you know what? I'm all about giving accountability for the actions off the field for NFL players. And hey, listen, I don't want to say that, you know, give any good credit to Roger Goodell or who's the disciplinary guy now in the NFL. I keep forgetting his name, but
Roger Goodell? No,
he's the commish. But I think they have a guy that hands down the suspensions. But he got 3 games, and that's not good for the New Orleans Saints, who are trying to start anew with David Carr and so forth. And we'll see how that goes. And by the way, with that new haircut you got, you look like David Carr. if you actually, as soon as you start shaving, you're gonna look just like him. You know?
God.
No, you look good. You look good. You look just like David Carr. That's what I immediately thought. So that's just, that's what's going on in New Orleans. Don't look for them to be any kind of a formidable thing, but Kamara is a key component for that team. So we'll see, right?
Right, absolutely.
One other thing, we keep talking about hockey and how hockey salaries are not commensurate with the other 3 major sports, right? These guys aren't making that kind of money. But the Washington Capitals signed Tom Wilson, and they're paying him $7 million a year. And now Tom Wilson is what we used to call an enforcer. And we've seen what he did to Panarin a couple of years ago in Madison Square Garden. But you know what? They see him as a physically dominating defenseman and somebody that protects Ovechkin and so forth. So, you know, they rewarded him with a $7 million a year contract, $45 million. And if you look at the up and down, we talked about this in the NBA with Jaylen Brown, now the highest paid guy. You know, Tom Wilson's got to be up there, and you know, he's nowhere. What does that mean for guys like Connor McDavid and all those kind of guys that are coming in? You know,
retire now before it's too late. That's what it means, basically.
Yeah, you're right. Another note. I saw a good story, and it was on Bob Cousy, and Bob Cousy is turning 95 years old. And Bob Cousy, maybe Eli doesn't know. I know your dad certainly knows who Bob Cousy was. He won 6 championships with the Boston Celtics and Bill Russell, and he won the national championship at Holy Cross. And he was also the first NBA player to be on the cover of Sports Illustrated. And Bob Cousy, you know, it's just a great story. If you want to read a bio on somebody that persevered and, you know, wasn't given a chance, but he was just a dynamic, one of the all-time great NBA players. And, you know, that's the kind of thing when I think about when we talk about Hall of Fame in sports, you know, Bob Cousy, nobody could ever even hesitate and say, of course, 100% first ballot, no question, Hall of Fame. You know, is Pau Gasol in the same kind of category as him? No. But you know what? Bob Cousy is still the face of the Boston Celtics, and just wanted to give a shout out to his birthday and so forth, because I was a big fan watch if you wanted Eli. I don't know if you got a chance to see. I think it's a Netflix special, 2-part on Bill Russell, and I've talked about this on the
Okay.
show before. And Bob Cousy figures prominently into that, and the whole racial situation with Bill Russell and how the Boston people loved him on the court, but off the court wasn't accepted, kind of thing. Bob Cousy stood up for him the whole time, and just like Pee Wee Reese and all those guys did for Jackie Robinson back in 1947. Great story, though, right? But here's another random point. I got to bring this up because it came up, and you know my feelings on sports gambling and how they're so closely tied with these sports, right? So now ESPN, right? The face of news now has their own sports book. And it just drives me crazy. I just see this and I see the conflict of interest and I just can't reconcile it. Drives me nuts.
Yeah. Well, I'll add more details to that. So ESPN, it's called ESPN Bet. It's been announced in partnership with Penn Entertainment. They announced this, believe it or not, one day before the Walt Disney Company announced their third quarter earnings. So they're trying to be smart. They did that right before the earnings call. Very smart of them. And there you go. Apparently, Art Okawa, who we interviewed on the 12th Horseshoe podcast, he had no idea about this. He found out like everybody else. Nobody in ESPN who he's talked to knew about this except for high corporate officials who've been working with the owners like Bob Iger and all that. So that's just want to throw that out there. So nobody knew about this. And apparently it's not going to be releasing till the fall, but right in time for football, of course. And the ESPN's smart about it. They're not dumb. And yeah, good decision, I guess you could say. And I got a few random.
Well, listen, I guess if you're a stockholder of Disney, it's a good decision. But from a sports perspective, I find it appalling. And it's funny because it's coming off your book review from last week about Bob Iger. So no question that Bob Iger is a businessman, but I just can't see how the ESPN can get involved in this. I know when they give the sports odds, but now you could place a bet directly with the channel you're watching for your sports news. I find it appalling. I can't get over.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to add 3 random points for you to add to the group. Malik Andrews will be replacing Mike Greenberg on ESPN's NBA Countdown. This because of Mike Greenberg's busy schedule. Will be continuing with the Get Up and his radio show Greeny, and plus he still has a lot more stuff. So that is the only reason why. So will not be seeing Greeny on NBA Countdown or on the NBA Finals. And NBC's most watched presentation, the Pro Football Hall of Fame, was that Thursday, and it beat the 2018 average. And we are less than 2 months away from the start of hockey. And episode 2 of Hard Knocks will air this Tuesday, 10 p.m. on HBO Max. I can't wait for it, and I can't wait to talk about it because that has been funny to watch. That's all I can say.
Okay. Hey, listen, I think this Malik Andrews has deserved it. She's got
absolutely. It's not gonna be the same without Mike Greenberg, but good for her. It's gonna be woman power back in the booth.
Yeah, and Steve and I have always been Mike Greenberg fans. I think
always been
awesome.
Too. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. One last random point of interest I wanted to bring up because this was a guy that I used to watch. I know you weren't around at the time, but the Dodgers retired number 34, Fernando Valenzuela's number. And when you look at the year, I mean, he came up, his nickname was El Toro, and he was the Cy Young winner, Rookie of the Year, and World Series champ in 1981. And this guy had a really, really good career with the Dodgers. He finished 141 and 116 and with a 3.31 ERA. So this guy was very unorthodox delivery. I don't know if you've seen him. He was slightly overweight, as we would say back then. But he had a great year in 1981, and he was a Dodger for, I think, 8, 9, maybe even 10 years. So that was a good move for the Dodgers because he was certainly beloved by the Dodger fan base, and he had just absolutely a great year. I think he was the first guy to win Rookie of the Year and Cy Young in the same season. But I remember watching him pitch, and he was pivotal against beating the Yankees in the '81 World Series. So they raised the banner and retired his number, and I have no problem with that at all. Different than the Mets retiring Keith Hernandez's number, because I think that was just over
joke.
the top. He didn't play long enough, and
Hmm.
if it wasn't for Bill Buckner, he wouldn't have won the World Series with the Mets. But Keith
I
Hernandez,
agree.
I consider him a borderline and potentially deserves to get in the Hall of Fame because he was one of the best first basemen I've ever seen. But having his numbers retired by the Mets, like Valenzuela with the Dodgers, doesn't seem on the same
Right.
vein there, you know. Anyway, so good random points of interest, Eli. Thanks for throwing a couple other ones in there. So we're going to do our book recommendation now. And Eli did a great job last week on the Bob Iger autobiography. I'm back to one this week. It's not sports related, but it's called River of Doubt. And River of Doubt was a book written by Candace Millard, and it was about Theodore Roosevelt's expedition down some uncharted territory down the Amazon River. And you know what? We could say it's not about sports, but this guy was tough as nails. And he did this thing. And when you read this book, you are literally going down the Amazon with these guys, and they barely got out with their lives with disease and the rough waters and the local Aborigines that never saw people before. I'm a Theodore Roosevelt fan, but this is a great book for somebody to read and
Right.
endure what they had. There some of the guys that went on the expedition didn't come back, and some people say Teddy Roosevelt never recovered from this. It was such a brutal experience, but he did it. Great book, and I highly, highly recommend it to our listeners. It's an amazing book. Anyway, so that's our book recommendation for the week, and I just wanted to bring up a couple pictures that Eli has for us here. I talked about it. I put a clip up of my grandson, but this is a very proud moment for me, standing with my grandson with his championship trophy, and it was just something really, really special. And there he is, with the catcher's equipment on,
Right.
holding up that trophy. And what makes it so amazing to me and makes me so proud of him, because I played sports and Steve played sports. I never won a championship from 8 years old or 9 years old in baseball, basketball, football, and high school. And we had good teams in high school, but I never got a chance to have that picture taken,
Right.
holding a championship trophy. So I'm kind
Good
of
for him.
living vicariously through my grandson, but it was just a very, very special moment for him. I'm
Let's see,
so
proud moment.
proud of him. I know he's proud of it. And that was just, when you talk about a collective effort, that was a team effort from the coaches and every player on that team. And I'm glad he got a chance to experience a championship, because they're hard to come by,
Right. Absolutely. Good for him. Congratulations.
Oh, absolutely. So we're going to move on to our notable passings, and we do have a few, and sometimes they're from sports, sometimes they're from entertainment or other influencers and other professions, right? So William Friedkin, who was a big-time producer, and some of his movies were great. French Connection, absolutely great movie. Also was the producer of The Exorcist, and as Jeremy Bennett, one of our loyal listeners, points out, those weren't even his best movies. There was a movie called To Live and Die in L.A., and William Friedkin was the producer of that movie, and that shouldn't go unnoticed, because that's an awesome movie, by the way. But big time Hollywood producer. Another actor, and Eli, I hope you've seen Rudy, right? The movie Rudy.
No, I've not.
Oh, okay.
All right.
I keep forgetting. Robert Swan was an actor in both Rudy and Hoosiers. Hopefully you've seen Hoosiers at least. Please tell me you've seen Hoosiers.
Never seen in the movie.
These are two of the greatest sports movies of all time. You're a sports guy. You got to get involved in this. You got to know, right? So I'm highly recommending those. So Robert Swan was in both Hoosiers and longtime actor. But those when we talk about sports movies, Hoosiers and Rudy he was in, it was just great. Wanted to bring that up for sure.
Right.
Again, allergies here. Anyway, Another one, Jim Price. Now, Jim Price was 81 years old, was a backup catcher for the Detroit Tigers, backed up Bill Freehand for a long time. Was on the World Series championship team in 1968 where the Detroit Tigers beat the St. Louis Cardinals, which was no easy feat, by the way. But, he had a solid, mediocre career. But when you talk about guys, sometimes a backup catcher or a backup somewhere on your team to fill in when your guy can't go. And Jim Price was one of those guys. And he passed away at the age of 81. And from the world of music, and this is a big one for sports with Mono and Mono, Robbie Robertson, who was the lead singer of The Band. And all the songs, The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down, The Weight. I mean, The Band was just, very prominent in the world of rock and roll music. And, Robbie Robertson, he was 80 years old. And there's a movie that they played, they made called The Last Waltz. And it's just, from a rock and roll perspective, it's amazing. Had very tight connections to both Bob Dylan and Martin Scorsese, by the way. They were like literally best friends. They're working on a movie that Scorsese's having coming out called Killers of the Flower Moon. And so from an entertainment perspective, first of all, you got Scorsese, so it's going to be great. And it's about Robbie Robertson. And he was just very prominent. And that hit home for us because he was a great musician.
Yeah.
And I got one other one I wanted to bring up because did the show from Saratoga last week, and last week was also the Whitney Stakes, which is a very big race up in Saratoga.
Right.
And you see something happen like this. The irony here was Bill Parcells, former Giants and Jets head coach, had a horse called Maple Leaf Mel. And she was, Maple Leaf Mel was winning the race, coming down the stretch, and then broke his leg, and they had to euthanize the horse on the track for humane purposes. So it was as beautiful as Saratoga is, and you watch these races, it's absolutely amazing and beautiful to see. But unfortunately, stuff like that happens, and it actually happened to Bill Parcells' horse. So I wanted to give a shout out to Maple Leaf Mel because I was there, but I wasn't there for that particular race, and it would have happened right in front of me because I stand on the rail by the finish line, and that's where it happened. So, we've talked verbatim about, horse racing and, these kind of things happen. But that was a terrible thing to watch in such a great setting. But I certainly wanted to bring that up as well.
Absolutely.
Right. So, Eli, what's up for your week? What do you got going here?
Nothing much. I have I'm continuing the drone work with football for St. Mary's on Monday. I have my next episode of 12th Horseshoe Podcast on Tuesday, and then I'm off to Wallow for vacation from Wednesday to Sunday. I'll be in Wallow doing the show. I'll be making sure it happens, and yeah.
Good, because our fans started to panic, going, "Wait a minute, Eli's going on vacation." Eli, you can't go on vacation.
No,
I haven't been on vacation and missed a show in 5 years, so I know you got that same kind of commitment. But I hope you have a great time down there. Yes. And we'll do the show same time next week.
Yep, same time next week, and I'll be there doing it live.
And we're getting close to high school football, only a couple weeks away, and the season starts. So I'm excited about that. I'm going to try to arrange to get a guest on next week, and you and I will catch up during the week.
Absolutely will.
right? But again, I just, before we always close, I just, again, can't thank everybody enough and for all the support for Steve and so forth. And like I said, it's very, very important for us. Our audience is building. I love it. And we're getting some good feedback. You brought a lot of good things to the show. So we're Sports with Mono and Mono is in a great place. And we're going to move this to the next level. And
Absolutely.
again, always send us an email at sportswithmonoandmono@gmail.com. And again, thank you for all of our loyal listeners, the Mike Garveys down in Naples. And thank you. So, Eli, good show. Great job on the producing part of it. And
Thank you.
enjoy your week down in Wildwood. And we'll
Yes,
be
I
here
will.
same time next week. And
All right.
thanks again. And thanks to all our loyal listeners. And we'll see you back here next week.
Thanks for watching, everyone.